with you in Dublin on this 89th anniversary of the Easter Rising, when we remember the men and women of every generation who have given their lives in the struggle for Irish freedom. This year there are over 100 commemorations taking place across the length and breadth of Ireland. Republicanism is strong, comrades, and continues to grow. It is patently obvious from the reaction of our enemies that we are impacting on the future shape of our country. And just as they used quicklime to bury the leaders of the 1916 Rising here, they also meant to bury the spirit of resistance. Today our opponents are trying to bury the same resistance in the quicklime of criminalisation. Did they succeed in 1916? Did they succeed in 1981? And will they succeed today? The fools, the fools.
We are here to recall the landing of arms of the Irish Volunteers in 1914 on this pier. It was an event that made possible the 1916 Rising, and we also remember with pride all those who have died in the struggle for Irish freedom since then. I now call on Pamela Kane to lay the wreath.
July 1914, when the yacht Asgard, which was skippered by Erskine Childers, came in here into Howth Harbour with 900 Mauser rifles for the Irish Volunteers. On that day there were some 800 volunteers who marched from the city centre to the East Pier. The signal for the landing of the rifles was to have been a boat sent out from Howth to Lambay Island, where Erskine Childers was with the Asgard. That signal never came, but Childers took the chance, and he came in to the harbour with the rifles. When the rifles were unloaded, the volunteers marched back into the city, And at Fairview, there was an attempt by the Dublin Metropolitan Police, the Royal Irish Constabulary and the British Army to apprehend them and take the rifles. They managed to get some of them, but most of the volunteers got away. But in the city centre, after that event, there was a detachment of a British Army regiment called the King's Own Scottish Borderers, and they were jeered at by a crowd on Bachelor's Walk because the news had got back into the city of this coup by the volunteers that they had landed this amount of arms and they'd got away. And the King's Own Scottish Borderers fired on the crowd, and 3 people were killed: Mrs. Duffy, James Brennan, and Patrick Quinn. And they're buried.
I want to congratulate the organisers, not just for this year, but for re-establishing this commemoration. I think this is the 3rd year now it has been since re-established, and I think it's well worth. Very historic, as Micheál has pointed out there, the history of it, and also this beautiful spot, Howth, in County Dublin. Since last year, in this area, in Dublin North East, Sinn Féin and Republicanism received a powerful boost. We now have 2 sitting city councillors in Dublin North East, but also I want to especially mention for Bernie Quinn, who is the chair here today, who took on, I suppose, what was a job and a role that not many would have relished or wanted to do, was to stand in an area where we had never stood a candidate before, in the Howth Baldoyle ward. But Bernie done excellently well. She held up a vote that was there, and I think in future, not alone will it stand to us in general elections, but it would also stand to us on Bernie in local elections in the Howth Baldoyle ward, where I have no doubt that with the hard work and commitment that Bernie and the local area put in, that she will also someday be elected to Fingal County. For the first time ever in Dublin North East, we have 3 now active Sinn Féin coming, and I want to congratulate the people who came on board into new areas, especially this one, and set up a coming here. Again, it's not easy work, it's hard to do. You're going out in there into strange ground, and I suppose furrowing new ground, but anyway, it was done, and congratulations, and I think it's manifested here today with the crowd that are here also. None of this, of course.
And that's why weapons were needed, to resist them. If Britain was a peaceful nation or recognised democracy, so this whole struggle would have been sorted out in 1917, 1918. Of course, they didn't. And so we had people bringing in weapons right up until quite recently. And I think that's an honourable tradition for people to defend what is theirs, to defend their own country, and to fight for their neighbours, and to fight for justice and equality, and that justice is going on. Now, Micheál already dealt extensively with the whole historical circumstances around the ash card, so I'm not going to deal it. An old man offered this rifle that he had buried for a number of years to the Republican movement in the area, up at North Louth, South Armagh. Now, it took a significant bit of work to get the thing cleaned up and get it into working order, because at that time weapons were particularly scarce. And at that same time, the British government had in excess of 35,000 British soldiers in the 6 counties in the north. They also had a significant number of paramilitary policemen running about, both shooting and torturing our people. So all the help could be needed to try and repel those British invaders to our country. And this Mauser took a bit of cleaning to try and get into working order, and after several weeks of volunteers scraping and scrubbing and oiling and cleaning it, they got it to something that it was, they felt usable on this ambush with this Mauser rifle. And when he came back, he was reporting to his OC as follows. How did it go, the OC said? He said, well, yeah, it's a good enough rifle. He says it went reasonably well, but there's a few faults with it. Oh, he says, what? I wonder how you went. What happened? Well, this ambush was at night, and he says, well, there was a flash out of the muzzle. He says that would remind you of a bonfire at Halloween, which is not a good idea, because you're giving away your ambush position right away. He said there was a bang. You know the crack of a rifle, it's snappy enough crack. But he says there was a crack, there was a bang out of this rifle, like a 500-pound car bomb going off. Oh, jeez, that's dreadful. And he says, I got a thump on the shoulder equivalent to a kick of an angry jackass, he says, every time I fired the bloody thing. So anyhow, the Mauser, for all its faults, I think there's a song about it describing it as the thrusty Mauser. So it was a good old rifle, and fair play to everybody associated with bringing in those weapons to try and help Irish people to defend what was theirs, trying to defend our country against British invaders. And our battle sites are still the same. They are the streets of our towns and our cities. It is the roadways all around the countryside in Ireland. And our volunteers are still the same, even if it might have changed slightly in terms of our volunteers are now volunteers in Sinn Féin, going off armed with our policies, armed with our promises of justice and equality, armed with our track record in terms of all these issues. And that's how we are going to deliver the Irish freedom struggle for the people of this nation, and particularly for future generations of Irish people.
How strong and we was, we are both dreaming. I see them again, who are married and dreaming. To your both England men. When I was alive, there was marching and drilling.
Dinner time and later afternoon. I know I'm getting physically weaker. It is only to be expected, but I am okay. I'm still getting the papers all right, but there's nothing heartening in them. But again, I expect that also, and therefore, I must depend entirely upon my own heart and resolve, which I will do. I received 3 notes from the comrades in Armagh. God bless them again. I heard today's announcement that Frank Hughes will be joining me on hunger strike on Sunday. I have the greatest respect, admiration and confidence in Frank, and I know that I am not alone.
The gap between rich and poor increased. Why has the percentage of elderly, ill and disabled living in Ireland increased? Why has child poverty increased? Why does Ireland have the lowest life expectancy in the EU? 15. If we ever had it so good, Bertie and Mary, why are more young people taking their own lives? The suicide rate in Ireland has trebled in the past 10 years. Why are teenagers and school children consuming more alcohol, opiates, inhalants, cannabis, ecstasy, cocaine and prescription medication than their European counterparts?
To the Field General Court Martial held at Dublin Castle on May 9, 1916. We went out to break the connection between this country and the British Empire and to establish an Irish Republic. We believed that the call we then issued to the people of Ireland was a nobler call and a holier cause than any call issued to them during this war. We succeeded in proving that Irishmen are ready to die, endeavouring to win for Ireland those national rights which the British government has been asking them to die to win for Belgium. As long as that remains the case, the cause of Irish freedom is safe. Believing that the British government has no right in Ireland, never had any right in Ireland, and never can have any right in Ireland, the presence in any one generation of Irishmen, of even a respectable minority, willing to attest to that truth, makes that government forever a usurpation on the crime against human progress. I personally thank God that I have lived to see the day when thousands of men and boys and hundreds of women and girls were ready to affirm that truth and to attest to it with their lives if needs be. Signed this day, 9th May 1916, James Connolly, Commandant General, Dublin Division, Army of the Irish Republic.
Pádraig gach duine camaraderie agus a cardia go ardifig on fush while you are clear. I'd like to welcome you all here today to the GPO, the headquarters of the provisional government during Easter week. And before we start, I just want to comment on the powerful crowd here today, both at the Garden of Remembrance and on the march, and here at the GPO, and people lining the streets. And I just want to remind ourselves of that little guy from Limerick's name, Willie O'Who, or Willie O'D, is it? Who during the week came out and asked people, imagine a so-called Republican, asking people not to come out and honour the heroes of Easter 1916. So this is the answer to you today, Willie O'D. I'm now going to call on the Colour Party to lower the flags in memory of the women and men of 1916. Thank you.
spur in an ocean tachta. Ta era, trina, e garm clona could have rotagogs e bula bula sona sersha.
Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons our children to our flag and strikes for our freedom.
There are mad lines of marching men in squadrons passed me by. No pipes did hum, no battle drum did sound its loud too, but the angelus bell or the Linfield bell rang out in the sky.
Now, I'm of an age, unfortunately, and I can remember the time of the government of this state used to commemorate on this very day the leaders of 1916. They don't do it anymore. They're afraid, they're ashamed, I don't know. But we keep on that tradition. And comrades, maybe they're not fit to do it. We're the real inheritors of the leaders of 1916.
Roll of Honour. O'Glock, Tom Smith, 17th of March, 1975. O'Glock, Patrick Cannon, 17th of July, 1976. O'Glock, Colin Dalton, January 15th, 1983. O'Glock, Mick Timothy, 26th of January, 1985. O'Glock, Christy Hartford, 5th of May, 1992. O'Glock, Martin Doherty, 21st of May, 1994.
Rising of 1916, we remember the men and women of every generation who have given their lives in the struggle for Irish freedom. The leadership of Glasnevin extends solidarity to the families of our comrades who have fallen during this phase of the struggle. We remember those comrades with honour and pride. We send solidarity to our volunteers and to our friends and supporters at home and abroad. We think of our imprisoned comrades and their families at this time also. Over 10 years ago, the leadership of the IRA declared a complete cessation of military operations. We did so to enhance the development of the Irish peace process. Those who opted to follow the Thatcher path will not succeed. Our patriot deads are not criminals. We are not criminals. Republican men and women suffer deprivation and torture to defeat attempts to criminalise our struggle. 10 of our comrades endured the agony of hunger strike and died, defeating the criminalisation strategy. We will not betray their courage by tolerating criminality within our own ranks.
Tá fáilte roth agus tá achas mór orm a bhéin seo live anew. I am extremely proud and honoured to be here with you today, standing at the front of the GPO, the headquarters of the 1916 Easter Rising. At that time Dublin City was a cradle of the Irish Revolution in the early years of the 20th century. The city of the Great Lockout, and 3 years later, the Easter Rising, the city of Larkin, Connolly, Pearse and Markovich. During those years, Dublin was a cauldron of revolutionary action. During Easter week 1916, Dublin was witness to a momentous chapter in Irish and world history, when Ireland, through her freedom fighters, stood by us to cherish their memory and the freedom they died to achieve. The British thought that by killing them, they would extinguish their memory, and with it, Ireland's freedom spirit. And of course, yet again, the British got it wrong. In the words of the South African poet Don Matera, writing just a short while after Nelson Mandela was released, his words about the situation there are just as appropriate for what was happening at that time in Ireland. Gone, buried, covered in the dust of defeat. Or so the conquerors believed, but there is nothing can be hidden from the mind, nothing that the memory cannot reach, touch or call. Dublin Republicans have played their part in the national struggle in every decade since. Indeed, it was young Dubliners who helped to reinvigorate republicanism in many ways during the 1950s, and who helped to redirect and focus its energies on removing partition. I pay tribute to all those Dublin Republicans who, down through the lean years for this struggle, kept alive the flame of freedom. In every generation of struggle against British occupation, the policy of criminalisation was introduced in an attempt to break the spirit and sap the energy of Irish Republicans. Character assassination was used by the British against those Irish patriots who chose peaceful means of resistance, just as effectively as physical assassination was used against those who used armed struggle. The men and women of 1916 were called criminals and terrorists in their day. The Irish Independent referred to the rising as criminal madness. Today, Sir Anthony O'Reilly, as I believe he likes to be called, the owner of the Independent group of newspapers, carries on that pro-British view of Irish republicanism with relish. And of course we know why the British gave him a knighthood. We are a proud people. We are very proud of our history, and we make no apologies whatsoever to anyone for our struggle and resistance against British occupation. Process to a successful conclusion and to build towards a different Ireland, a new Ireland, a united, free and independent Ireland. Bear Bua Chucky Arla.
Generation of Republicans can bring to fruition the aspirations of the people, men and women, who went in there and other parts of this city in 1916. There's a lot of work to be done. We're the people, no one else will do it. We have to do it. So we urge you all to get back into your areas and rededicate yourselves to the cause of Irish freedom. I would also ask the people who came out last year in their droves and supported Republicans in this city to do that little bit more, to get involved with your local Sinn Féin area. Do a little bit more. As our comrade and our hero, Bobby Sands, has said, everyone has a little bit of a part to play. We must urge ourselves to do just a little bit more to bring about the day when we have Irish freedom.
Men that are listed on the plaque there that fought in the Rising and died. But all around us here is where they buried 250 people who died during the Rising. Many of them in volunteer uniforms and Irish Citizen Army uniforms, but they weren't recognisable to the families, so they don't know. All this land here, this is all paupers' graves, and that's what they were buried in 1916. So we come here this morning to remember them and the sacrifice that we made. Now a read will be laid on behalf of Dublin Sinn Féin.
We're here once again to remember and pay honour to fallen comrades and to commemorate the ongoing struggle for Irish independence. This, as most of you will already know, is the party's centenary year. Sinn Féin will have been in existence for 100 years in November this year. In modern times, we have never been as strong as we are today, have never been so organised and have never been so popular. 342,000 voters throughout the island of Ireland vote for Sinn Féin today, and that is something all of us here can be very proud of. I'd now like to call for a moment's silence on the lowering of the flag.
Volunteer Joseph Costello, aged 22, died the 26th of April 1916. Volunteer Andrew Byrne, aged 32, died the 27th of April 1916. Volunteer Andrew Cunningham, aged 22, died the 1st of May 1916. Volunteer John Hickey, aged 25, died the 14th of December 1920. Volunteer Edward Dorrans, aged 22, died the 25th of May 1921. Volunteer Thomas McMannion, aged 22, died the 17th of September 1922. Volunteer Francis Power, aged 22, died the 2nd of November 1922. And Sinn Féin member Noel Jenkinson, aged 47, died the 9th of October 1976. Guramagut.
Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and, supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes...
The leadership of Old Naherden extends solidarity to the families of our comrades who have fallen during this phase of struggle. We remember those comrades with honour and pride. We send solidarity to our volunteers and to our friends and supporters at home and abroad. We think of our imprisoned comrades and their families at this time also. Over 10 years ago, the leadership of the IRA declared a complete cessation of military operations. We did so to enhance the development of the Irish peace process. From then until now, we have, on a number of occasions, demonstrated our continuing support for this process. Republican men and women suffered deprivation and torture to defeat attempts to criminalise our struggle. 10 of our comrades endured the agony of hunger strikes and died defeating the criminalisation strategy. We will not betray their courage by tolerating criminality within our own ranks. We will not allow our opponents to further their own petty self-interest by levelling false allegations against Oglig Naherden.
Relic show, relic a tábhachtach ó hef public tháinig, ní gách fecin an rulla an áir atá also córan sin an lac cuimhnachán. Chun fecin an méid daoine a fuór bás, son na saoirse, son na náisiún. Agus sin an fág bhfuil med an seohan jobh, chun í sin a hógan chun cuine, playing their role. And when the first ceasefire happened, we presumed that everybody was on board and that everybody was going to be genuine. Well, it didn't happen. At that stage, the Brits weren't genuine. The Unionists, Homer Bruton, wasn't genuine either. And in fact, that's why the IRA at that stage went back to war. Because the peace process was not genuine. People weren't committed to it. The only people who were committed at that stage were Republicans. Now we need to remember back to those years in the 1990s, and we need to remember back to before that and to compare it with today. The Tony O'Reilly rags, the Irish independent groups, have come into their own in recent times. But all they're doing is exactly what they were doing in 1916, when they came out and they called for the execution of the leaders of 1916. The Irish independent group has never been a friend of Republicans, and it's never been a friend of this peace process. And they've shown their true colours in recent months. That is Republicanism is motoring along. And the local elections, the Assembly elections and the European election last year showed what we're capable of doing. But also, they know we're capable of a lot more. So what we need to do in this, our 100th birthday year, is we need to re-energise, re-engage, play our part, join Sinn Féin, join the commemoration, take part in every other event that we have going this year and every other year, until we bring around the conclusion that the men and women who fought and died in 1916 and afterwards, that they fought and died for, that we bring that to conclusion and that we build on that forevermore.